Hello, my dearies. I hope y'all are having an awesome day today. This is my first video for Tea and True Crime with CJ. Yay! And I'm going to discuss all types of true crime cases over a loaded tea. Here's my loaded tea. It's almost gone. This is my second take on this case because the first one, I didn't realize that the microphone's battery went out and you can't hear nothing. So here I am, and I didn't want to make myself a second tea, but this was Tiger's Blood. It's strawberry and orange. Ever since I first opened Upstep, this has been one of my faves. Every so often I do go back to it, but here's what's left of it. Next time it'll be prettier, I promise. Cheers. What's left of it. Like I said, this was a second take. If you are a loaded tea junkie and a true crime junkie, then this is definitely for you. I will do my best to keep you entertained. I think. No, I know so. I'm a little nervous, but I figured why not? It's not like I'm going to do this full time, but I will try to upload at least 2 videos a month. It's a small start, I know, but I'm also uploading 2 videos a month in Spanish, which brings my grand total of uploads to 4 videos a month or so, I hope. I have already uploaded a couple of cases in Spanish, and I will link those in the description below. And so you guys may be wondering, why crime? Well, I think it's important to bring awareness about different topics that need to be addressed, shed a light on those hard to discuss topics. In today's case, well, it's incredible, horrifying, and miraculous all at the same time. This is one of those stories that makes you think that there are forces from beyond that guide us and protect us. And I think God was on this girl's side because her attack was shocking, horrible, and violent. So with that being said, let's start with my first case. We'll be right back. So for today's case, we're going to another continent in another country. In southeastern Africa, the city of Port Elizabeth is located on the shores of Agoa Bay. The city has beautiful beaches, interesting museums, parks with walking trails, and there's just a lot of tourism because it's just so beautiful. Kind of similar to Destin, Florida. Port Elizabeth has the kind of beaches where you could enjoy a loaded tea at. It's just beautiful. I would want a vacation there. A woman by the name of Alison Botha lived there. She was born in 1967. She lived with her parents, Claire and Brian Botha, but then her parents separated when she turned 10. Alison stayed with her mother, Claire, and her brother as well. So when I researched this case, I discovered that Alison was a top-notch student, and after graduating from high school, she dedicated herself to traveling around the world. She had no responsibilities that stopped her, so she gave herself the opportunity to know the world. But her main mission was to find herself. By this, I mean she wasn't sure what she wanted to do with her life, and she was basically searching for her calling. So she left for a couple of years and she returned to Port Elizabeth, where she finally settled down. She started working as an insurance agent. So at this point, Alison had it all. She was happy. She was happy at work too. She had awesome friends. She had no worries about her life. Everything was just perfect. Like my loaded tea. Okay, I'm just kidding. Okay. But of course, this didn't last long, because soon after, she encountered 2 of the worst individuals anyone could ever meet. Who are they and what did they do? Well, let me tell you. The first is Frans the Toit. He was born on July 6, 1968. He grew up in the town of Alawa. His father was an officer of the law, I did scour the internet to find out more about his mother, but I didn't really find much. But I do know that Frans grew up in a loving home, although his father was strict with Frans, and there's nothing wrong with that, shoo. Some of today's kids need that and more. Anyway, the family always went to church every Sunday. Francis' father was very religious with a conservative mindset, and he raised his son on these principles. But fast forward a few years, Frans began to live a life of crime at an early age. By the age of 13, he was already doing drugs, and it is stated that he burned down the high school that he was going to. According to him, he did not want to go to school, and his father, being an officer of the law that he was able to get Frans out of it. He was still expelled from school, though. His parents tried to enroll him in another school, but no one would accept him. His father made the decision to move the whole family to Port Elizabeth. So we're in Port Elizabeth, and this is where he met a girl who practiced the dark arts. According to this girl, she was a witch, and Frans was impressed at the fact. And the more they got to know each other, the more comfortable they became. And finally, Frans and the girl started to perform satanic rituals. And so his parents began to notice that Frans was failing a lot in school, and they did not want their son to hang out with this girl. And they basically blamed his behavioral problems on the girl that he was hanging out with. So then they took him out of school, and they forbade him to ever see the girl again. A few more years passed, and Frans reached his 18th birthday. It was around this time that he signed up for military service. He served 2 years. When Frans got out of the army at the age of 20, he met another girl, and this relationship moved fast because they got married soon after. They had a little girl, and when he starts having a family, you would think that Frans would settle down with this. You would think that he would, get his shit together. He's over literally 20 years old at this point in time. But he doesn't. I guess he felt like something was missing in his life because soon after Frans left his wife and his daughter, he revealed in later interviews that he left because he wasn't being satisfied sexually. He found several jobs, but Frans was lazy and wanted to take shortcuts to success. And he was always fired for bad behavior, and one time he even stole from his employer. And this irks me. This is one of my pet peeves. Why would you want to steal from your boss? Like, if you want to be successful, like, work for it. There's just no shortcuts to success at all. And if you don't like your job, then do something about it. Like, better yourself, gain knowledge, grow. Anyways, that was my little rant. And since Frans didn't have any money, he obviously always ran to mommy and daddy to ask them. And since his father was an officer, well, who better to get his son out of trouble than him? And here's the kicker. Frans lived like this all the way up until he was 25 years old. And I think this is a big problem. Hello? 25 years old and mommy and daddy are still having to bail you out of troubles? Frans never had responsibilities. He was never disciplined. And if he was, it would only be like a slap on the hand. Don't do that. And that's it. That's all that would take place. So he was literally never disciplined. He was never made accountable for his actions. In 1993, Frans got married again. He got his wife pregnant, and since he was still in that satanic mess and the rituals and whatnot, well, this dude performed some satanic ritual over his pregnant wife. And shoot, I myself, I would not mess with stuff like that because you never know. There's just like there's good, there's evil, and I just would not ever want to mess with something like that. So Frans here, he is married with 2 children now and on his second marriage, and he still has no prospects in life, and he was still relying on his parents financially. And maybe he was just a late bloomer, nothing wrong with that. I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he'll turn his life around, right? Right? So we're still in 1993, and this is the year when he met a 19-year-old man. He goes by the name of Theuns Kruger. Now, Theuns was born in 1975 and he grew up in a different environment from Frans. Very different environment. His father was a criminal and he was addicted to drugs. He never knew his father because he left his mother before he was born. His mother married a second time, but that marriage didn't last very long. So the mother gets married for the third time. And yeah, this didn't end up well. It didn't go good. Theuns' life actually got worse. This new husband of hers beat the crap out of his mother, and it didn't stop there. It is said that Theuns suffered under his stepfather's hand, too. So Theuns was not happy at home. And when it came to school, it wasn't better. Theuns was the victim of bullying. He had it bad at home, bad at school. Maybe he grew up with hatred in his heart. There may have been a sense of dread of his future because he has known nothing but misery since he was born. And I know I sound like I'm trying to excuse him from his actions, but I'm not. But the point that I'm trying to make is that hatred usually is born from somewhere or something. Theuns left school when he was 15 years old, and he also went to the army soon after, but he left when he was 18 years old. By this point in time, he had considered taking his own life multiple times. Theuns also practiced Satanism with his girlfriend, who, according to her, was a witch. This relationship did not last because by the age of 19, Theuns was already single again. So we come to June of 1994, and it's during this month that Frans and Theuns met by chance, and they got to talking about the past and discovered that they both practiced Satanism. They both had a lot of things in common, but the dominant of the two, without a doubt, was Frans. Not only because of his age, but because Theuns had always been alone, always suffered for all of his life. I think Theuns saw Frans as a confidant, and also, I guess he had a lot of admiration for him. Theuns saw Frans as like an older brother, the older brother that he never had. Theuns was the follower, and he never disobeyed Frans after this. In 1994, Frans S.A. a woman, and for those of you who don't know what S.A. is, I would say it, but due to YouTube policy, I can't. But I can describe it as when a human being invades another human being's body without consent. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, so on this assault, I kind of gave it out, but on this assault, Theuns was not involved. The 20-year-old woman was sitting in her car. Frans had approached her with a pistol and entered that car by force. He drove them to a place alone and proceeded to invade her body. And you know what I mean. But he wasn't done after the attack. This guy, this Frans, took her to a restaurant as if they were on a date. I guess he's just trying to apologize. It's as if he's telling her, thank you for lending me your body. What a disgusting human being. And after dinner, he took her back to the same place, and the woman suffered another SA on her body again. And this time she was forced to tell him that she loved him. When he finished, Frans let her go, but not before telling her this. And y'all, this made me so mad. Like, it literally pissed me off. This monster said, and I quote, "You're an amazing person. I hope I can make it up to you someday." What the fuck? The poor woman did go to authorities to report him, and he was arrested. But he was let go. There was no evidence, official says. There's no proof. We can't hold him with no proof. Well, I guess if there was no proof, and remember, this was 1994, so in investigative skills, they didn't have the same things as we have today to, I don't know if SA kits existed back then, but 1994, that's literally, 30 years ago? Yeah, 30 years ago. In 30 years, technology has made a big jump in 30 years. So I kind of get it. The first time, but what about the second time? Months later, December 4th, 1994, a 21-year-old woman was walking alone. She was 3 months pregnant. Frans pressed a pistol against her belly, and he made her walk to an isolated place where there were a lot of trees. It was just deserted. And this time, Theuns was there waiting on them. The woman suffered SA by Frans and Theuns. She begged them to stop. She was begging for her baby. She was worried because they were being very rough with her. And after they finished, they started discussing the decision to get rid of her, to make her stop breathing altogether. And they did this in front of her. Can y'all imagine that? Two people deciding whether you get to live or die in front of you? I just can't imagine. Should we kill her? She's pregnant. But she's going to turn us in. Nah, she won't. It's okay. Let her go. And they were having this conversation in front of her like she was nothing, like an object, like two people just randomly deciding what to do with her. Hey, what am I going to do with this? And lucky for this woman, they did let her go, and she went straight to the police to file a report. Theuns and Frans were arrested. They were questioned, and after the interview, they were released. But the investigation was to be continued. They did have to return to court on January 5th of 1995. But why were they let go? This is what I mean the second time. The first time I get, it's 1994. But the second time, within months apart, I'm assuming that authorities would at least remember his first assault, his first crime. You would think that they would remember. I mean, it's only months apart. How could they forget that soon, Frans had already been arrested before for the same thing months ago. In other words, it was clear that this man was a danger to society, a danger to unsuspecting women. I think that since his father was an officer, I think he may have pulled some strings so that they would go lenient on his son. But who knows? Maybe I know nothing, but that's just my opinion. It's my assumption. At least that's what I read from sources that, his father had always gotten him out of trouble. These two monsters were let out on the street, and it's sad because before their court appearance on January 5th, these two idiots are going to commit the most horrible crime unimaginable. They shouldn't have been walking around like they don't owe anything to anyone. I think that the officials involved in prior cases should apologize on their knees to women who were in danger, specifically one. Do you remember Alison, the girl who finished high school with good grades and then traveled the world and then settled down in Port Elizabeth, South Africa? The one who started working as an insurance agent. At this point in time, Alison was 27 years old. And so we come to the night of December 18, 1994, just 14 days after the last SA assault against the woman committed by these two pieces of poo-poo. Alison spent the whole day with her friends on the beach. They went to Alison's apartment and they ordered pizza and they hung out, just talking and, just playing around and just talking and just hanging out. And it wasn't until 1 a.m. when friends finally decided to go home. All but one was left. And this person, she wanted to walk home, but Alison, being the good person, wouldn't let her. She's like, no, I'll take you. It's too dangerous for you to walk alone. So Alison went to drop off her friend. And when she returned, her parking spot had been taken. Someone else had parked there. Alison had no other option but to park further away from the apartments, where it was a little darker and a little bit more deserted. So she parked. She turned off the car. She flickered the lights off, because, back in the day, you manually had to do all these things. It's not like today's vehicles where you just turn off the car and leave. So once she had done all of these things and she reached over to get a basket of clean clothes that she was going to take inside, she started to open her door, but it just flung open by itself, and Alison felt the warm air from outside. And then, move over, someone said, or I'll kill you. It was a man, and he pressed a knife to her throat. She got frightened, but she immediately did what was asked of her. It was none other then Frans du Toit. And he sat behind the wheel and he drove off, taking Alison with him. As he drove, he would tell her, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. I just need the car for a while and I have some errands to run. I have to get these done." So basically, he just made it seem like he wasn't interested in her. He was more interested in the car. And so Alison was already crying and she was thinking about jumping out of the car, but Frans was driving super fast, like very, very fast. And so he kept the conversation going and he's like, "What's your name?" And she lied. "Susan," she said. "My name is Susan." She didn't say anything for a few seconds and then, "What's your name?" And he lied to her too. He tells her that his name was Clinton. And then, "Do you live in your apartment alone?" "No," she quickly said. "I live with my boyfriend and he's going to look for me very soon." She had to try to escape and she was scared to death. "Why don't you let me go? You can just take the car if you want," she told him. "I have to pick up a friend of mine first," is all that Frans said. And they came to a stop at a nightclub. Alison wanted to make a run for it, but Frans had like the knife pointed at her in a threatening manner. And there were a lot of people there, but she didn't dare, do anything. And I know some people out there are going to be like, well, she should have ran away. She should have made a run for it. There was a lot of people there. Why didn't she? But here's the thing. You never know how you're going to react in a situation like that. I remember that one time I panicked when someone began to convulse in front of me. This person literally just fell to the ground and I called 911 immediately. And one of the first things that they asked me was the address, the location. And it just flew out of my mind. I didn't remember and I knew this address by heart, but somehow I just forgot. I literally had to go to the Facebook page to find this address, something that I knew. Like if you were to ask me today, I would literally tell you right now. I just don't know what happened. And that just goes to show that fear doesn't let you think. It just doesn't let you react sometimes. It just paralyzes you and I don't know. So I kind of understand where Alison was coming from. So a few moments later, Theuns came out of the club and sat behind Frans, and Alison caught a glimpse of him in the rearview mirror, and what she saw gave her cold chills, like literal chills to her bones. She saw nothing but a cold, evil, and calculated look from Theuns. This is what she said in a later interview. Alison knew that something bad was going to happen to her. And so they drove to the outskirts of Port Elizabeth, where it was a little bit more deserted. And all this time, Alison was drowning in fear. She was just terrified. And Frans veered off the main road to a dirt road. He parked the car. Theuns then got out of the car and Alison was left alone with Frans in the car. And in a later interview, Alison said that at this point in time, the silence was louder than her beating heart. She said it was deafening. She was terrified. All she could think to say was, "Now what?" "We came here to have sex," Frans told Alison. And then he kind of sort of held up the knife and then said, "Are you going to refuse?" What? You're holding up a knife and you mean to tell me that I have a choice? And the only thing that Alison saw was the edge of that knife, the edge that glinted under the moonlight. And she glanced at Theuns, who was smoking, outside and a ways from the vehicle, and she just knew that there was no way to fight. It was too lonely out there. There was no one around, and she wasn't even sure if they carried other weapons. What if they had a gun? So even if she made a run for it, if they had a gun, and you just never know. So she considered all of that and she finally made her decision. She said, "No, I'm not going to fight." And here, I'm not going to be explicit. The only thing that I am going to tell you is that he said some very, very vulgar things to Alison while he SA'd her. So during the assault, Alison was cheering herself on. She kept telling herself, "He's doing this to my body, but not to my spirit. He cannot have that. I will not give him that." And she repeated this over and over in her mind while the SA was taking place. After Frans was done, Theuns was next. and he was way rougher with her. After they were both finished, Frans and Theuns got out of the car and they started discussing whether they should kill her or not. And it was during this discussion that Alison heard their real names. It was Frans and Theuns. I have to remember those names, she told herself. Frans and Theuns. Those are the names. And the very moment she heard the decision to get rid of her, she ran out of the car to escape. But Frans catched up with her. He climbed on top of her and he begins to choke her with his hands. She begged him to stop. Alison felt like she couldn't breathe. She was basically starting to black out. And Frans pressed on her windpipe so hard that Alison emptied out her intestines. Apparently, this was involuntary. I guess the body reacted that way. She was going unconscious, and I don't know, I'm no doctor. Everybody's body reacts differently to, different kinds of trauma. It seemed that Frans got even more angrier and he put even more pressure to her throat to the point of her trachea snapping under his weight. The little tube that we all have to breathe snapped. And it's at this time that Alison lost all consciousness completely. And she couldn't breathe the moment Frans broke her trachea. Frans then took out his knife and stabbed Alison several times in the stomach and her private area. And I think Frans lost control because he stabbed her not once, not twice, but a total of 35 times. It's like he went into a total frenzy with her body. 35 times in Alison's stomach and in her private area. That is a lot. I just can't imagine. That's 35 stab wounds. And the thing is that they were about to leave because they thought there's just no way she could have survived that. She's dead. There's no way. I mean, if somebody were to tell me that somebody got stabbed 35 times on the abdomen area and the pelvic area, I would think that there's no way that that person, could survive. But Alison moved her leg and Frans and Theuns were startled because 35 stab wounds, and against all odds, she was still alive. There was a glimmer of hope for her, or so it seemed. But all hope is lost because Frans grabbed the knife again and slits her throat once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and he did not stop until he reached number 16. He ran that knife a total of 16 times from ear to ear. 35 and 16 was a total of 51 stab wounds that Alison had just suffered. And here's where I think one of the first miracles took place. Well, actually, I would say the second. The first already took place, and I will explain that later, but I'll say the second took place here. You see, during one of the first times that Frans cut, the breathing tube, and he slid the knife just below where he had crushed moments earlier when he was choking her, because he crushed her trachea. But Frans cut just below where he had snapped her trachea to kind of like open her airway. So she couldn't breathe before, but now she could. It's as if he had given her like a second chance at life because he had opened her airway once again. If he would have left her like that without cutting her throat for a few more minutes, Alison would have definitely, passed on. And then something else happened during the slashing of her throat. The worst possible scenario happened to her. Like, I even have a phobia of this. During the attack, Alison regained consciousness. She didn't know what was going on and everything was blurred in front of her, but she sensed movement. She knew somebody was near her. Blurred movement going back and forth in front of her, in front of her eyes, and that's all she saw. She didn't know it at the time, but yeah, what she was seeing was Francis' arm going across her field of vision as he kept slicing her throat. This is just insane. I just can't believe that she woke up in the middle of the attack on her body. It's like, I just can't. It's like waking up in the middle of surgery while they're cutting through your tummy or something, and this is crazy. And finally, after what seemed forever, Frans, satisfied, he stood up, sure of himself. There's no way she could have survived that, Frans told Theuns. And they kept discussing whether she was, dead or not. And so Alison was conscious at this time, and she heard that, and she got as still as she could. And finally, Frans and Theuns left. But as they were leaving, they threw her clothes out through the window, and she was left alone, naked, and very, very badly hurt. And Alison thought about giving up, but then she started to hear noises, and she got scared again, and she kept listening, and she later described it in an interview that it was just an awful gurgling sound, and she just couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it took her a minute to discover that the noise was actually coming from her. The noise was coming from her throat. And so she reached to touch. She only felt warmth and, the thickness of blood and just a very big open wound. And this was when she found out that she was breathing through her throat, through her wounded trachea. She was not breathing from her nose. She was not breathing from her mouth. She was breathing through her severed windpipe. I just can't. And one of the things that I wonder when I was looking up this case was if she felt pain. But according to her, oddly enough, she really didn't feel it at all. Like, she didn't really feel pain. I guess it was, I don't know. But according to her, she really didn't feel pain. And at this point in time, when, after Alison felt her severed windpipe and the very big gash in her throat, she was really convinced that she was going to die. And she sat there waiting for death. But then after a few seconds or maybe a couple of minutes, she got angry and she got mad. And she thought to herself, if I'm going to die, then I'm going to make sure those bastards are caught. They deserve to go to jail for what they did. And so with great difficulty, there in the sand right beside her, she wrote the names Frans and Theuns because she remembered. This is crazy. I don't know if I could ever remember the names. I don't know how she remembered. I don't know. That's why she's a badass. After she wrote the name, she wrote, "I love Mom" underneath. She later said in an interview that she wrote that because she wanted her mom to know that she was thinking of her during what she thought were her last few minutes of life. After she wrote the names, she stayed still, literally waiting for death, waiting for her body to succumb to her injuries. But death didn't come. I don't know how. 51 knife stab wounds, especially the throat part. That's 16. I can't imagine 16 times. That is a lot of damage to a human body. And so since death didn't come, she started to be like, yeah, I can survive this, man. And so she struggled to get up on all four, kind of like to crawl. But then when she got up on four, she felt something warm and wet brush across her thighs. And so she had a look and she couldn't believe what she saw. Guys, y'all, this is so bad. Part of her intestines were hanging out of her stomach. Not only her intestines, but other organs. This is just horrifying. Like, can you imagine being on all four and just looking and seeing your insides literally just hanging out of an open wound? Like, the wound was big enough for, I just can't. I don't even know. I just can't. Frans stabbed her so many times to the point where there was a big open wound on her stomach that her intestines just came out like that. Like, they just slipped out. They just slipped out of her body. How else could I describe this? And I know what you are thinking. And at this point, you're probably wondering, like, dang, CJ, why would you want to talk about this specific case on your first episode? Even I thought that to myself, but I thought it was really important to show that there is a God. I did have other episodes in mind, but I don't know. This one is so inspiring to me, and I don't know. I just wanted to do this one first. It's important to show that even when everything seems so bleak, so hopeless to get out of a certain situation, that there is still hope, and as long as you have that little bit of hope that you will always find a way out. And Alison's strength surprised me. I just think that someone or something must have been taking care of her. It's like the universe was on her side, and you will understand why soon enough. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So remember the clothes that Frans and Theuns threw out of the window as they were leaving? Well, Alison was really close to them, and she crawled to her clothes and she grabbed the shirt that she was wearing moments earlier, and she pressed the shirt against her stomach to hold her organs in. Like, I just can't imagine this. Like you having to use your own shirt to hold your organs in, essentially. Like, I just, I can't. Like, this is unbelievable. And at first I didn't believe it. I'm like, man, is this... But no, this happened. And she tried crawling the rest of the way, but she knew she had to stand up. It was less likely for her to get an infection, and it would also be faster. And I don't know how she did this, but she managed to stand up. But something else happened. As soon as she stood up, and she described this as being a weird sensation in a later interview, she said that she lost her line of sight. Everything just turned black, but that she felt her body. She felt the presence of her body. And she knew this because she sensed like the movement from her arms, the sand between her toes. So she's like, what the heck is happening here? Why can't I see? I know I'm still alive, right? Like, she even started doubting that she was alive at all, you know? I guess I could say it's kind of like similar to being blindfolded and you kind of like just feeling your way around. I guess that's a sensation, but I just can't imagine. I don't know. So she raised one hand to kind of figure out what's happening with her eyes, but she didn't feel anything. Her head wasn't there. So she lowered her hand a little bit more, but nothing. And she lowered her hand a little bit more. And this time she felt something warm, something wet and slimy. And yeah, she was horrified to discover that there was nothing but a big open wound at the base of her neck. So where the heck was it? And so she felt around a little bit more, and this is going to sound so bad, guys, but she found her head. It was literally hanging in between her shoulder blades against her back. Like her head had literally flopped over and was just hanging on by a thread. The same thread that was giving her life. She had, oh my gosh, I just can't. She had literally been almost beheaded, essentially. This is truly horrific. I just have no words. And you would think that she would literally give up because, I mean, how could anyone survive that? It's just, oh my gosh. So her body was literally torn as if she just suffered a bear attack. When I was reading this case, there's a movie that came to mind. What is it? It was Leonardo DiCaprio. The Revenant, I think is what it's called, where he suffered a bear attack, and that was just gruesome. So I don't know why I got reminded of that movie when I was looking into this case, but damn. But Alison was a badass because she herself pulled her head up where it should have been, and she could finally see. Like, she literally had to put her head back in its place. This is crazy. I just can't picture that. This is just insane. This whole case is horrible. It's bad. The damage that Frans caused to her body, just horrible. And she began her walk to the road with one hand holding her head in place and the other holding her organs, like inside her body, keeping her organs in. She was literally falling apart, guys. This is unbelievable. Her body was practically torn to pieces, and she was still going on, fighting for her life. And the full moon, and this is another thing, precisely that night, there was a full moon. And step by step, she made it to the road, and it was like literally like I would say this was like the longest walk of her life. I'm pretty sure it was, because dang, I just can't imagine. I just can't. when she came to the road, she literally placed herself in the middle of the road and she collapsed from tiredness. And all that was left for her to do was to wait. And she waited for a couple of minutes and then she saw a pair of headlights of a car. And immediately, I guess she got scared because she was worried that Frans and Theuns were coming back. Like, what if it's them? Trying to make sure that, she actually passed on, that she died. And she was terrified at this thought. But this car stopped a few seconds and continued on. This car didn't even help her. Like, this car literally went around her body and continued on their way. And when I read this detail, it literally pissed me off. It made me so mad. Like, why would you not want to help anybody? And I'm like, come on. But then I stopped to think. It's lonely. It's a lonely road. It's past midnight and there's someone naked laying in the middle of the road. What if it was an ambush? Who knows? But I get it. So a couple of minutes passed and another vehicle pulled up. This was where her knight in shining armor was because she desperately needed the help. They were a group of students from Johannesburg. They had come out to Port Elizabeth for vacation, and one of them was a student who was studying to be a veterinarian, a 20-year-old student named Theuns. Now, I know that this sounds very similar to bad Theuns, so from now on, I'm going to call Alison's knight in shining armor Good Theuns. But I don't know if I'm pronouncing it wrong, or Theuns? Who knows? I don't want to butcher his name. Good Theuns literally ran out of the car and he ran to Alison and he checked her pulse and it was very low, but it was still there. And while he was doing all this, looking over Alison, the girl who had followed him out of the car was behind him and she was just screaming crazy. And he sent her back to the car. He told her, hey, you just need to go back to the car. You need to get out of the way. Bye. And this just goes to show you that how much of a badass he is too. To be that calm and collected in a moment of chaos. If there was ever a zombie apocalypse, I would want him on my team. That's how calm he was. And Good Theuns was very surprised when Alison suddenly opened her eyes. Theuns took off his shirt and he put pressure on one of the wounds on her neck, and he directed one of his friends to do the same with some of the other visible wounds. Another friend who came with him used his cell phone and called an ambulance for Alison. And I think this is another miracle. I mean, guys, it's 1994 and not everybody has a cell phone at this point in time. It's pretty new. Dang. That was literally 30 years ago. And Theuns did everything possible to keep her alive and to keep her conscious. And she got scared a couple of times, but Good Theuns would calm her down. He would say things like, breathe, breathe. He told her, breathe with me. And he breathed with her and she breathed with him. And I don't know, he had just had this calming effect on Alison because she felt safe. And he put all of his focus on her and he didn't let any kind of distraction get to him because he honestly wanted her to live. He wanted to save her life. This is when he noticed the shirt that was covering her stomach and he pulled it back and he was shocked at what he saw. He saw literally her intestines exposed, her other organs just exposed, just protruding from her stomach. He knew that this was a critical situation, no doubt, but Good Theuns still kept his cool and kept his focus on her, and he kept talking to her. He called to another one of his friends and he told him to massage her legs. He told him that it's important to keep circulation going through her legs. Good Theuns did not know if Alison was going to survive at this point because, the injuries that he saw, they were pretty bad. And so he tried to get as much information about her attackers. And Alison couldn't really speak, so he developed this squeeze 1 for yes, squeeze 2 for no, or, some kind of communication between them. And so it was through this that Good Theuns learned a great deal about her attackers. He knew that it was 2 people, the type of car that they took off in, and also their names. Good Theuns asked Alison, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And Alison told him no. And he told her, "You have to live so that you can take me out. It's because of you that my shirt went to waste." And this made Alison smile because she honestly felt like this human being right in front of her was literally cheering her on and really wanted her to live. Oh. And he kept making sure that she would not go to sleep. He kept telling her, "You have the most beautiful eyes. You can't shut them for me. You have to keep them open. You have to make sure you keep them open." And he kept on, and he just cheered her on. And it was during this time when he noticed, and I just think that's awesome. That's like really cool. Like, that's awesome. Like, not anybody could do or could have done what he did for Alison, because I know I myself would probably go crazy. I probably would have been that girl screaming when he got out of the car. Like, it just takes a special person to do what he did. And it was during this time when Good Theuns noticed that her thyroid was out of place. And so he spent a few minutes fixing it, fixing her thyroid, because, and I guess he knew how to do this because he was, remember, he was studying to be a veterinarian. I imagine it's similar. I don't know very well, but like I said, I'm no doctor and I ain't no veterinarian, and I wouldn't know the first thing about where to put the thyroid because I just don't know. It was getting harder to keep Alison conscious, and the freaking ambulance hadn't made it yet. Like, 15 minutes had passed, 20 minutes passed, and half an hour passed, 40 minutes passed, and still no damn ambulance. Like, Theuns was desperate. Like, where the crap was this ambulance at? Like, did they go out to eat? Did they stop for coffee? Or did they take the long route? And the cars were stopping to offer help, and people were gathering, and Good Theuns kept his focus on Alison. 1 hour, and the ambulance still didn't arrive. Oh, 1 hour, guys. Oh, I'd be so mad. A little while longer, and finally the idiots in the ambulance arrived. The ambulance should have taken a maximum of 20 minutes, but no, it took more than an hour and a half, y'all. And Alison did not want to let go of his hand. So Good Theuns went with her to the hospital. At the hospital, surgeons were shocked with Alison's wounds. Doctors could literally see the top of Alison's spinal cord through her neck injury. Oh my gosh. Out of 16 slashes, none of them went through the main arteries. It's a miracle that she's still alive. And doctors knew it too. The doctors later stated that if Good Theuns had not fixed her thyroid in place, she would most likely have died. Alison also had a very high chance that she would drown in her own blood, but it didn't happen. Her intestines were perforated and full of dirt. She had a high risk of infections there too, but she didn't get it. The stabbings in her stomach and her private area did not damage vital organs. Doctors later said that if Alison had not emptied her bowels, she would have died due to infection. This is incredible. Like, it's just like one miracle after another. And here's another one. In a weird turn of events, it was a miracle that the doctor on call was also a throat specialist, which was something that Alison really needed. And I don't know if it was luck or a miracle that Alison was still alive, but damn, I just can't. And doctors put in all their effort to save her life, and she was in the operating room for hours upon hours, surgery after surgery. And when she woke up, When she woke up, she saw Good Theuns, the one that saved her life, and she just burst into tears of emotion. Wow. Police went a day later to ask her about the assault, and she couldn't talk because she had like a tube in her mouth that helped her breathe. So she wrote in a few words what had happened, including the names of her attackers. But it's not enough. Investigators went to visit her once again. According to the law, it is necessary for victims to say the name of their assailants. The perpetrators must be identified verbally. What do you mean writing their names on a piece of paper wasn't enough, and doctors did not want to remove the tube because it was too early. But she did not want her attackers to remain free, and she ordered the staff to remove the tube. And she said, "Oh, this is a little bit better. Like, this is better." And then she said, "My attackers were Frans and Theuns." And I still can't believe that she remembered their names. Like, I don't know if I could ever remember a detail like that. Like, I just, oh man, you're a badass, Alison. Like, definitely a badass. And Frans and Theuns were found and arrested, and they didn't know why. They were certain of Alison's death, and what a surprise when they found out. They had no choice but to confess. And here's the kicker. They also talked about the plans they had for the following day. They said that if they weren't arrested for Alison's crime, they were going to assault another woman. They were also going to throw her over a bridge when they were done with her. So in the end, Alison did save somebody else by saving herself, and we will never know who may that have been. But I am so happy that Alison was able to do that. The full recovery was long for Alison, physically and emotionally. Alison's mom helped her a lot. The trial was traumatic for Alison. Frans defended himself by saying that Satan ordered him to do what he did, that he was possessed by demons, and that he was not guilty. Imagine what Alison felt when he heard this piece of poo-poo. But Alison didn't back down. She went to every court hearing, every day, every time, anything, until Frans was finally sentenced to 3 life sentences, and Theuns was sentenced to 1 life sentence. And during sentencing, the judge told him that if it hadn't been for the change of law that happened months earlier, eliminating the death penalty, that he would have definitely sentenced them both to death, without a doubt in his mind. But maybe this is for the best, because having the death penalty, that's kind of like an easy way to go. It's an easy way out. And maybe it's better for them to suffer every day for the rest of their lives in a cell, so that they can think about what they did. But in this case, I think I would have opted for the death penalty. And I will tell you why in a minute. But let's continue with Alison. Alison tried to rebuild her life, but she fell into depression. Everything was sad for her until she met her partner of 2 years. She got married and they tried to have children, but remember, she got stabbed 37 times in her private area and stomach. So the doctors at the time told them that it was not going to be possible for them to have children. 37 wounds, you would think something would be damaged, right? But another miracle happens. Another miracle. After a few months of marriage, Alison discovered that she was pregnant and she was able to carry this baby on the full term. A short time passes and Alison got pregnant for the 2nd time. And this is just awesome. Like, wow. And I have more pleasant news. Remember Good Tien? The one who helped her that night when she was attacked? Well, he changed his career from veterinarian to doctor. He became a doctor. And he became a doctor because what happened with Alison had such a great impact on him. So much that he literally changed his career. And this just makes me so, so happy because he was the doctor who treated Alison when she gave birth to her baby. Like, wow, this is just a happy ending. I wish this woman a lot of happiness and I wish nothing but the best of her because she deserved it. She deserves it. She deserves it. Some time passed and she wrote a book, which by the way sold very well. And she also traveled around the world telling her story to help victims of SA. And I'm just so happy for her. I'm so glad that everything is going good for her. In 2016, she produced a documentary about her story. The film is called Alison, and it's on Amazon Prime. I would totally recommend you watching it. I would not recommend you watching it with children. It's very, it's very intense. But during the filming process, Frans, from prison, contacted the director to request to be a part of the documentary, but that he had 2 conditions. He had 2 conditions on top of it all. The first one was that Alison had to write a letter of forgiveness signed by her. What an idiot. He is still trying to control Alison, humiliate her by having her write a letter where it states that she forgives him for what he did to her. What the actual fuck? Like, I can't with this guy. There's something wrong in his head. Second condition. He wanted part of the proceeds from the documentary, including the proceeds from the book. He wrote, if I hadn't taken Alison, she wouldn't have a story to share. What an idiot. Oh, don't even get me started with this dude. And they did not give in to him, and that's nice. Like, who the fuck did this idiot think he was? Woo! And I know some of you have literally never heard me. I'm not a cursor, especially in front of customers or whatnot, but damn! This asshole. And out of all this, there's another piece of bad news throughout this whole thing. Just one, I would say bad news, and it's enough to make anyone mad. It's damning, like, it's damning enough to hurt Alison, and this is why I would have gone with the death penalty from the get-go. Because in 2023, there was a change in law in South Africa where it says that those who were sentenced to life in prison deserve to have the possibility of parole. And because of that change, these two pieces of poo-poo are roaming the streets today. I'm mad. And this was the story of Alison Botha, and I was very moved, and there's so much that you can take away from her case. I did this story. This is my second time covering her story. The first time was in Spanish. The first time it got to me, like, I literally had to step away multiple times. Multiple times because, damn, my voice kept breaking and it just pulled the strings of my heart. I guess I got a weak heart, or I guess I have a weak heart or something. I don't know what's wrong with me, but damn, I did have to step away. And this story is just very moving because, I don't know, just is. And there's a lot that we can take away from her case. Like, us women, we've got to be careful. We've got to be aware of our surroundings, especially if you are out alone. And if you are in a difficult situation, do not lose hope to get out of it. As long as you have faith and hope, anything is possible. Hope. Dang. Alison had a lot of hope, and that's literally what kept her going. That's what helped her survive. But I also think there was something or someone that was protecting her from the beginning. I think God was on her side. Well, that's what I think, because these idiots were satanic. They both practiced Satanism, and they didn't win in the end. Alison was saved. Alison survived, and I think God put everything in line so that she could be saved. It's just that there were so many things that were in line for her that allowed her to be saved. For example, if Frans hadn't cut her throat a little bit lower from where he crushed her, her trachea to where she could breathe again, she wouldn't have survived. Or if she hadn't emptied her stomach, or if she hadn't, had her shirt to wrap her intestines in, or, put her intestines back inside, or if she didn't have the full moon for her to see the way to the road, or good teens who came along to help her and by chance had a little bit of knowledge about the human body, or the friend who had the cell phone to call the ambulance, or the throat specialist who was there by chance. Like, it was as if the universe was on her side, like God was on her side. And this whole case had me so emotional. I got emotional because I know that God was on her side, and gosh, she went through so much, and she's doing better than ever despite the hardships that she went through. Don't forget to leave me your opinions in the comments. And if you have a recommendation about a case that you want me to cover, let me know. I thought about doing the Taylor Parker case, but I don't know. It's a little bit too close to home. And before I go, I I figured it would be nice to mention a missing child from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And today I am going to mention, and I have my notes on my phone, so bear with me, Noel Rodriguez Alvarez. He was a 6-year-old boy who hasn't been seen since the fall of 2022. But the thing is that he wasn't reported missing until March of 2023, and he wasn't reported missing by his parents. Why didn't his parents report him missing? So I did a little bit more digging into his parents, and here they are. Cindy Rodriguez Singh, age 37, and then Arshdeep Singh. And just as they were about to issue the Amber Alert, the couple fled the United States. They took a flight to India, where he is from. Arshdeep Singh was actually Noel Rodriguez Alvarez's stepfather. So Cindy is the 6-year-old biological mother. After they left the country, a search warrant was served at their home, and they took cadaver dogs, and the dogs smelled traces of human remains on the carpets. So this is what led investigators to believing that this little boy is no longer with us, which is sad. This is just sad. I did a little bit of digging into Noel's biological mother. I found out that Cindy lost custody of her children, and Noel was placed with a foster family. She was convicted of driving while intoxicated with her kids. Like, who does that? Why would you want to drive while you're drunk with your children in the backseat? When she was convicted, she received 10 years probation. This is according to Tarrant County court records. I just decided to do this child because even though local authorities are presuming him, dead, and even if that's the case, it's sad that he might not get justice. And I just, maybe some sort of justice will be served for him because he deserved it. This angel deserves it. And so if you know what happened to baby Noel, I urge you to call local authorities or contact National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. Thank you for listening to my first tea in True Crime with CJ. Until next time.